Welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast. I'm Kendra Swalls, a former teacher turned entrepreneur and mom of two. As women, we are so much more than just one thing. We're wives, moms, entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and dreamers with goals and ambition. On this podcast, we'll talk about everything from juggling family, work, and fun to making your dreams a reality through simple, effective marketing strategies, all designed specifically for the busy mom who doesn't have a lot of extra time. So whether you're just getting started or already have an established business, there's something here for you. If you're ready to take on the challenge of becoming your own boss and making your dreams a reality, then let's get started because this girl means business. Hey there, welcome to episode 217 of the Girl Means Business podcast. Today is an interview episode, and I have my friend Juliet Hahn coming on today to talk to us about storytelling. Now, Juliet and I met a year ago when I went to PodFest in Orlando, a podcast conference. We met kind of just standing around in a group of people. Someone she was hanging out with knew someone I was hanging out with, and we all kind of ended up in the same spot together. And we just kind of connected, and I really liked her energy. She was really easy to talk to. Obviously, you'll hear about why she's good at talking. And I loved her story, and we just kind of connected over this little quick meeting. The next day, she was speaking on stage at PodFest. So I went and listened to her talk, and I was blown away with her, just her story. Obviously, that's what she does, is she helps people tell stories. But I was mesmerized by her on stage and by the stories that she was telling and the way she was able to just capture people's attention. And it's funny because you'll hear in our conversation, we talk about one of the stories that she told on stage that day. And I can remember, in my mind, I can see her on that stage telling the story because it had that much of an impact. And that is why she does what she does. She is a storytelling consultant, podcast host, keynote speaker, content creator, all the things. Her mission in life is to give people a stage to share their stories, and she believes deeply that everyone has a story and we can all learn from each other. So she helps people to connect the dots so that they can share and connect with more people by articulating their stories more clearly. So today we're going to have her come join us. She's talking all about how to take your story and turn it into part of your brand, and how to infuse your stories and the pieces of your life that turned you into who you are today. And the fact that that is what created the business and the brand that you are working in, and that your story is part of that, and how to share that adequately. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Juliet Hahn. Hey, Juliet, welcome to the Girl Means Business podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I want you just to introduce yourself to my audience. Let them know a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, I know we met last year, and our kind of energy and synergy we hit it off. So I'm super excited to be here. So I'm a mom. I am an entrepreneur. I am a storytelling consultant, and I'm also a podcast host of probably 4 shows and counting.
So many.
I know. Maybe it's a little insane, but I have many different ones. I have a live one that I do the week before the Super Bowl. And so just, many things, and I know we'll get into it, but first and foremost, a mom, but then, all the things about storytelling and sharing and connecting and networking are really up my alley.
Yeah. So quick question, and I know you told me this before, and I always forget, your kids are older, right? Teenager age?
I have three teenagers. I have 17, 15, and 13.
Okay. So you're getting to the point, which is nice because mine are getting there. But did you start your business when they were younger? Are you kind of finding that now you're able to really have more freedom and flexibility in your business?
So I would love for the answer to be yes. But I started, so I stayed home with them for many years. I did the volunteering thing. I used to teach fitness classes when they were young. So I always dabbled in a little things, when they were at school or in elementary school. But I started really this business and my podcast in 2019. So they still were younger. Yes. But, teens, things change, school, oh, I don't have to be here all this time because we have a test. Can you come pick me up? And it's well, no, I'm trying to run a business. I'm staying at home. So there's things that come up, but it is one of those things, if you're kind of organized and and know that things could change and be okay with that. You know what, my hours are, yes, longer than when kids are little. Like, some of your listeners are gonna be like, yeah, but we're talking nap times. Yes. I mean, it's very different than that. So I do have hours in the day there, but it's, still not where it's like, I know I'm going to be uninterrupted, but I don't think life, ever really kind of allows you to do that when you're a mom. So
no, I think each age, like I remember thinking when my kids were little, like, oh, I just can't wait till they're in school full time and I'll have all this time during the day. And then now they're in school full time and I still manage to, like, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, we'll come volunteer for this, or, hey, I forgot my lunch. Can you run it up to me? And then that's 30 minutes, so it's, there's always, no matter what age, or then you become carpool, like you're running them to and from things from like 4:00 to 8:00 at night. It's like, you're just driving Miss Daisy everywhere.
Well,
so
and
it's
that's
always something.
Yeah. And that's where it is. I mean, I do have my oldest is a driver now, so it is, but he's got his own sports schedule. So yeah, I mean, at 2:15, I have to shut it down, where before it was a little bit later. It also is seasonal. So like if they're playing school sports, also their academy sports, I do have flexibility in there. It's like, okay, during this season, I know I can work until 3 or 4. During this season, I'm done at 2. So it's one of those things. It's just, you have to be flexible.
Yeah. So mamas, listen, just know every season has its challenges, but they do have their benefits as well. So it's coming, I promise. All right. So Juliet, one of the reasons I really loved chatting with you, and I'm excited to chat with you about this on this show, is because you deal a lot with storytelling when it comes to creating like content in your business and things like that. And I remember years ago when someone told me to read the Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, and it kind of changed my view of like how I engage with my audience and how I put content out. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, it's a great book if you're learning how to sort of early stages create content in your business and how you're creating it for your audience in a specific way. And ever since then, I've been really fascinated with the idea of storytelling and the power. I mean, like, for generations, that's how we have told our life tales, is through stories. And so it makes sense that becomes part of how we tell the story of our business. So I am really excited to dive into this with you. So kind of give us a little bit of information about what exactly does that mean to incorporate storytelling into your content in your business?
So this is what I kind of time and time again is tell people is, we all have a story. There's people that are like, no, my story is insignificant. Oh, I can't even speak. It's not significant. I did this yesterday. It's not significant, but it is, because parts of our stories are going to connect deeper with people that we're trying to connect, like, so if you have a small business and if it's a product that you're trying to sell, just going out and selling the product, even if it's a great product, you're not going to connect with their number of people. But if you start a little bit about why you started the product, but also about maybe some things in your life that shaped you to then be that entrepreneur, someone's going to be like, wait, I want to know more about her or him because of that little snippet that you told them about maybe your early childhood. And so I really go by this, is you could have a really amazing product, but not know how to tell your story. And no one's going to that product because they're not connecting with you. But you could have a really crappy product, but be an awesome storyteller. And you're getting people to buy one time, right? One time, maybe you don't get the repeat, but you're getting people to buy one time because you connected. So there's so many times if you're watching TV or, you're somewhere and you see a commercial, how many times have you been like, I don't even know what it is, but where's the .com? Because I want to go see it. I connected with that story. I want to know more about it. And then half of the time it's like auto insurance or something that you're like, oh, okay, I don't need it. But if you do need that auto insurance at that time, you're going to go and dig deeper. If you're not happy with the company or the product that you're using, then you're going to go and switch. So it's really important to be able to articulate. And the thing that's cool is, again, people are going to think, oh, I don't have a big story. I don't have trauma, or I didn't go through this and I didn't go through that. But really, we all do. Life, no one lives life without stuff. It doesn't matter, what it is, whether it's, not being able to get pregnant, having a preemie, starting your business, losing everything, then there's always parts of your story. And my story really started when I was in that I remember that really shaped me is I was in third grade and I'm dyslexic. So, but I grew up in a town that everyone was good at everything in my mind, right? And everyone, but my older sister was dyslexic. My dad's dyslexic. So like my mom had knowledge of it, but the entire class, and I had a lot of friends, the entire class went to gifted and talented. And myself and the one boy that was like the troublemaker in the class went to special reading. And I remember going and having to follow this lady, and she was like a slow talker and she was a real slow walker. And she had she was like shaped funny. And I was like, what am I doing? And I had to go, and she's like, we're reading The Blue Dolphin. And I was like, I don't want to read The Blue Dolphin. Like, where did my friends go? And after class, all my friends came back and they were like, where did you go? And I was like, I had to read The Blue Dolphin. And they're like, why did you have to read The Blue Dolphin? That's awful. I'm like, well, what did you do? And they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be in this competition and we get to create. And it's like medieval times. We get to do javelins and puzzles and all these things. And I was like, well, what? Well, how come I'm not getting to do that? And I remember going home and asking my mom. My mom already knew, okay, she's struggling. Asked my mom, like, this wasn't a good time. I didn't have a good feeling. And she said, oh, I told them you couldn't do it because we have X, Y, and Z the day of the competition. So it was going to be a waste of your time. And I was like, oh, great. I was the kind of kid that I didn't dwell on it. I just went off, was with my friends. Oh yeah, I can't do it. We're going to be traveling the time you're doing, but have fun. Still not happy that I had to read The Blue Dolphin, but I excelled at other things. I was really athletic. I was really good at making friends and making people laugh. I had, a good personality that I connected with people. And so I had my strengths that I knew, but that was an early time. And when I tell that, so many people have connected with me, offline or whatever. And they're like, thank you for sharing that. Not even selling anything that I'm doing, not even talking about my podcast, just putting it out there, letting people know there's going to be tough times in your life. But if you look at them, look back at them, think about how they shaped you. So then I went to college. I played 2 college sports. I didn't let my schooling, even though I had teachers tell me I was never going to college. I had, my guidance counselor telling me, you're not going to go to college. So just forget about it, because everyone in my school had, 4.0s and above. And I had, barely 2.0. But I did go to college and I did exceed. And I actually got on the dean's list when I was in college. So I also learned that I was smart, played 2 sports, was able to really do a lot of stuff. And so when people connect with me because of that, it's different. I can kind of relate to them. They can relate to me. And then when they keep following me and I start talking about other things that I'm doing, sometimes it turns into listeners, and then they get to connect on a deeper level there. So storytelling is it's a really important aspect of life, and connecting it in any way, whether you're making content, whether you have a business, knowing your business, like what your business story is, why you went into that business, why you decided, and looking back in your life and thinking about the parts, like my 3rd grade story, like how that shaped me.
Yeah. No, and it's funny when you were telling the story about going to the dyslexia class, and I remember that was the story I think you told when I first heard you speak at Podfest last year. And you went into detail about the lady you had to walk behind and how she her buttons. And I was like, oh, I remember this. And that's the thing is I saw several speakers at that conference, and I remembered your talk because the story stayed with me. And I think that that's something, they talk about in schools that kids learn really well when something is in song format because of the rhythm and the repetition piece of it. But I also think that people learn a lot through story, and it stays with us longer. And I think back to my high school, speaking of school, and I had a history teacher one year, and I think we were learning world history. It was so boring. And I could not tell you one thing I learned in that class. I just remember dreading going to that class. But then the next year I had a history teacher who was incredible. He was the best, probably one of the best teachers in our school. And he made everything we learned feel like it was a movie we were watching. Like it was a story he was teaching us, and it stuck with me. And so even the way that our brains store information, I think they store stories and so much longer than they do just information that we take in.
Yes. I mean, definitely. I mean, and some people are different. Some people are more like that mathematical where they need the bullets, but you can still tell a story for them to connect. Because the one thing is, when you're excited and passionate about something, again, people don't realize the flow of their conversation is a little different. they get a little bit more excited. You can hear it in their voice. Maybe their posture stands up. And so someone's going to listen a little deeper because it's like, wait a second, I want to know more about what this person's saying. I haven't even followed, but I like their like tone. Their tone is pleasing. And that's something, that just kind of is a natural thing, the way humans are built. When you hear someone talking about exciting things, you want to learn more about it. And when you're talking about something that excites you, it is boom, it's going to connect. So it's really important to do like the practice, because a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about themselves. I get that a lot. Well, people will say to me like, a client will say, I don't know how to talk about myself. And so we kind of just dive through it, and I will be able to help them kind of pick those pieces out. And I'm like, you weren't uncomfortable talking about this, and you weren't uncomfortable talking about this. And they're like, you're so right. I really wasn't. And I'm like, no, you weren't. Yes, you were uncomfortable talking about these other things that did shape you, but let's see how important they are. How important are they going to connect? Because if you're not comfortable talking about them, it's not going to kind of be seen and heard and felt the same way.
Yeah. So, okay. Because I'm like, my brain just spins as you're talking. So I'm thinking of all the different places where we see this like acted out, whether it's in, like you said, commercials, or television, radio, podcasts, all those things. But I also think about like on social media, like for example, Instagram stories. We all think that like, oh, nobody cares about what I'm doing in my day. But how many times do we get sucked into what's happening in someone else's day that is so mundane, and it's not anything exciting, but because it's somebody else's life, we're just like glued to it. I mean, that's how reality TV even came to be about. Mm-hmm. So what, for someone who's listening and who's going, okay, I get it. Like stories are great. I maybe have a good story, or I have stories I can pull from my past or my life or things like that. What do I do with them? Like, how do I turn this into something that isn't just me talking about me all the time?
Right. That's a great question. So I mean, it's one of those things that you really need to practice. And I am not like, I hate practice. Obviously I played college sports, so I'm used to practice, but I'm also the type of person that I just like love jumping and doing it. However, I was just explaining to someone, like, I can do something in one take, but it's because I've been practicing for years, right? I've been telling my story now for years. And so I can do it in one take because it's easy for me to be able to articulate it. So again, thinking about the parts of your life, like I have boxers. I'm a crazy obsessed dog woman and I love my boxers. And I will get time and time again, people will be like, okay, your boxers are not on here enough. Like, I don't really want to hear about this. I don't really want to hear about that. I want to see your boxers. So I know I'll do a clip of my boxers as, a couple times a week, but then added in there is something that's, where I want to hook people in either to listen to my podcast or hire me for my consulting business. So it's kind of the whole strategy part of it. But again, yes, if your listeners, are moms also like to be taken out of their crazy life. They want to hear what else is going on, but they also want to connect with other moms that are maybe going through the same thing. So, I mean, I know with like teenagers, I mean, I love my kids deeply, and it's so crazy now they're all teenagers that like, they don't love me the same way they used to. They do, but they don't express it the same.
Yeah.
And so, some days just to be like, okay, it was a teenage moment. I don't really get specific into my kids because that's not fair to my kids. That's their story. But just some,
right.
Some days being like, oh my gosh, okay, I don't think anyone said thanks for dinner, or what, how was your day? Or, and just connecting a little bit deeper on stories, just simple is really important.
Yeah. Well, and I think about, so like I come from like a photography background. A lot of my listeners are photographers. And you think about like your audience, a lot of times they are either in the same phase of life that you're in. So you're talking about like your kids, like, I've got 2 young daughters. And so I talk a lot about things about my kids and the craziness of our life, or like the fact that they can't seem to clean up a bedroom to save their life. And like, these are all things that like my photography clients or even my coaching clients, they can all relate to in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And so those little things, or if they're not in that phase of life, either they used to be and they're like, oh, I remember that. My kids are older now, but I remember that phase. Mm-hmm. Or even the ones who are like, oh, I can't wait until one day my kids are that age and can do these things. Cause right now, like, they're just these like little babies that cry all the time, or whatever. So there's always somebody that is looking at what your story is and is thinking like, I'm either in that same phase of life, I can completely relate, or I remember that phase, or I can't wait for that phase. So like, I talk a lot about like knowing who your ideal client is and really speaking to them. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to say like, well, I don't want to share my story because it may not resonate with them. But you'd be surprised how many of these little, like, I think of like spider web strings, like you're in the middle and you've got all these little strands shooting off that are your stories in your life. And something is going to connect and pull somebody in. It may not be the same thing for everybody. And that's why I think it's important to share all these different aspects and all these different stories and all these different touch points.
And also it makes you more relatable.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So I just want to, and I love all that you just said and 100% agree with it. So I had, someone on my podcast that ended up being one of my clients, because she told her story wonderfully. And it was a really great story. She did a great business. She's had a good path. And at the end, I was just telling her, a little bit more about what I do. And saying to her, if you had anyone in your world, just, you see how I do a podcast, you see how I interview, if you could connect us, that would be great. She sent me an email later and was like, I think I actually need you. And I was thinking in my head, like, wow, she told her story like brilliantly. She had a whole part of her story that she couldn't like entwine in her regular story because it was so dark and she didn't know how to incorporate it. And literally after 2 sessions of us talking about it and her getting comfortable with just a couple sentences of her past, she had a keynote and she said, everyone's eyes stayed on me. She's like, I didn't have one person that put their, and I said to her, because you're more relatable, you're reaching now people that can relate to you. You've had all these achievements in education and academic world and your business. That's not as relatable as what you went through as a kid. And no, maybe someone didn't go through exactly but it makes you more human. Mm-hmm. And she said, I never thought about it that way. I was always a little ashamed but I was like, but look where you were and now where you are, the inspiration that you can give people because of what you have overcome is insanity. And so we've had about 10 sessions and it is like, it's so wonderful to see. Now she's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting more clients because you're right. I am more relatable. Other times, I guess people just thought of me, and she works with like very high leaders. Everyone has a story. Everyone has something dark in their story. And it doesn't mean like you had to, it doesn't have to be so dark that it's like, gut wrenching in this, but everyone has. Like my 3rd grade story, I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me and said, thank you. That must have been really tough, and they've maybe had like death in their family or like a brother or sister that was murdered. And to me, that's trauma, right? What I went through was just my life, but I still connected at a different level because of how that story affected me, but then also how that story shaped me. And then my path that took me where I told myself I wasn't creative for years. And I'm a confident person. As I said, I've had, I have some strengths. I have really good strengths and I know my weaknesses. But I remember like, even when my kids were little, I'd be like, oh, no, I'm not creative. And funny enough, I went into, communications, radio, television, and film. But when I first entered school, I went into corporate fitness because corporate, I was like, oh, I'm great with people. I can talk. That's great. Fitness, I know it like the back of my hand. It's what I'm good at. And I had to take anatomy and physiology. And that's where my dyslexia was like, you are not a science girl. Like I literally called my mom and I was like, why am I even here? Like this is high school all over again. Why am I doing this? I'm not going to be a professional athlete. Like I don't. And she's like, please stay. Let's rethink this. I happened to have tweaked my back at the same time. So I was taking some time off of sports and I explored. I was like, I like to talk communications, radio, television, film. That sounds cool. But the thing is, I never went into even though I was on the radio, I wrote a script, I directed and starred in a film, all these things that were creative. I was like, oh, I'm not creative. I'm not creative because I took that gifted and talented thing because they said, oh, we get to create all this stuff. I told myself I wasn't creative because I really couldn't draw, can't even do like a stick figure. My that's like terrible. My handwriting and all of that's terrible. And that's part of my dyslexia. But that again shaped who I was because when I took that, I went into the sales part of communications. And it's so crazy that now I am doing all the creative stuff and I'm really good at it. And I remember the day that I was like, am I insane? I am so creative just because I can't draw, because that's what I took creativity as, being an artist. And I sucked at being an artist. And there was a lot of dyslexic people that I knew that were really great at art. And I was like, well, they skipped me with that. I don't know. I don't know, God was like, okay, you're not going to be good at that either. And I was like, that's not fair. But it is those things that connect. But the stories that we tell each other, tell ourselves because of our stories, and then how we overcome them are, again, what's going to connect deeper with audiences. I told my kids all the time, oh, I can't do that project. You got to go see dad. Even with school. Oh, certain math. I'm sorry, guys. You have to go to dad. I can't do it anymore. When I really actually probably could. And I need to stop telling myself that I really didn't like it. And I would say, I did second grade. I don't like second grade. Or now I did ninth grade. I sucked at ninth grade. Find someone else to help you. I didn't really like it. And, but it's those things that connect, because little parts of your story, or whether they're significant in your mind or not, are what's important.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been listening to the Girl Means Business podcast for any amount of time, then you know my love of email marketing runs deep. Not only is it a great way to generate new leads, but it's one of the most effective methods for nurturing warm leads and turning them into sales. Now, over the years, I've tested several email platforms, and my favorite by far is Flowdesk. Not only do they make email marketing simple and easy, even for the technically challenged, but they have everything you need to create stunning emails, capture leads, make sales, and automate the entire process, giving you time back in your busy day. And the cherry on top is you're only charged one flat fee no matter how many subscribers you have. So while other platforms will increase your price when you go over your pricing tier limit, Flowdesk has no price increases or hidden fees. If you're ready to give Flowdesk a try, click the link below in the show notes to save 50% off your first year. Let Flowdesk help you design emails people will love. Click the link below and check it out. I have a feeling you're going to love it just as much as I do. Yeah. And I mean, there's always how many times I'm sure everybody listening now is thinking oh, there's so many stories I've told myself because of something that's happened to me in the past.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's part of your story, and all of those little things, I think about my version of, okay, well, I was a teacher for 14 years. And when I left teaching to run my photography business, I would tell people all the time, well, I used to be a teacher, but now I do this. And it was because I told myself this story in my head that what I'm doing now was not nearly as important or impressive as what I used to do. And that was a story I told myself. And again, that whole journey is my story of how I got to where I am today. So that leads me to my next question, which is, if we are thinking, okay, I do have a story to tell, or I'm starting to recognize that there are bits and pieces of my story that are worth sharing and worth telling, even though maybe I didn't think so before. What are some ways? Because then there's a lot of people that are well, I'm just not like you. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at that. What if people are well, I don't know how to make my story sound appealing? Because you listen to TED Talks, you listen to people on stages and podcasts, and there are people who are really good at creating a very engaging story out of seemingly nothing or an insignificant moment. So how do we take those same concepts and apply them to our story to make our stories more exciting and appealing, or tell them in a way that feels that way?
Right. So, I mean, that's a great question again, because some of us have gifts. I mean, I was born to communicate. Wasn't born to do a lot of reading and writing. I mean, I can, but early on, taking tests, doing schoolwork, that's where I really suffered. But I could communicate. All my teachers before class, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you in, my classroom. You're such a good communicator." All through life, I could literally get a job that I wasn't qualified for because I could talk and I could connect. And that is something that I'm good at. However, I still have to practice, and I still have to make it so it's not, you're kind of you have so many things that you want to share, but if you share all of them, it's whoa, that's a lot. It's a lot in someone's head. So one of the things that I do with my clients is I have them really kind of think and go through. And there's a couple different things that I always talk about. We have memories that are visual memories, but then we have memories that are feeling memories. And the feeling memories are sometimes the ones that are a little bit more important because we don't remember. And sometimes it could be trauma. So it could be a bad feeling, but you get this, like, you get that thing in your stomach, whether it's excitement or, ooh, I don't like that time in my life. Like when I talk about third grade, I don't have tons of memories. I have that memory, but I get like butterflies, like, oh, that sucked. I really hated that. Or when I had to take the SATs 1,000 times because I was getting recruited by a Division I school and I couldn't get my SATs 2 questions away from being recruited to a Division I go back to that. And that was a hard, sucky time when all my friends were recruited way more and I was more athletic than them, but I couldn't get my grades to thing. But that's part of my story. That's where I then, though, went on my journey and I was where I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be at that Division I school. Who knows where my life would have been if that. So if you think about those memory feelings, and then think about the kind of the feelings, those feeling memories, really dive in. And what I say to people is practice. I hate practicing. Again, I know, but it does make it better. So if you have a phone, if you have, on your computer, there's tons of different apps. You could do it on, Zoom, but just practice talking and telling your story. Have a friend practice telling your story. I mean, there's so many different ways you can do it. Writing down. So like when you're doing the kind of deep dive, I call it daydreaming because I can't sit and meditate. Like if I sit, I'm thinking about the laundry and like the dishes in the sink.
Yeah.
So I don't sit and like daydream at all. I walk my dogs, my 2 boxers every morning. Doesn't matter what the weather is. I walk them and that's when I daydream and I think. So that's what I like challenge your listeners to do. Find that time that you can really daydream. I know some of you guys are like, oh, I'm in the weeds with my kids. It's maybe when you're doing laundry, right? You pop in your headphones, maybe put like white sound on or music or whatever helps you really kind of dive and go back and think about your life and think about the times that you can't really remember visually, but you can feel. And then start diving into that. Like, what is that? What does that look like? Why in like, that 5th grade class, what was that experience? Oh, wow. I remember, there was a kid that was getting picked on and I actually stood up for him. And I got, my friends all were like, we're not going to be friends with you anymore. So stupid, right? But you did something good and now you run a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that experience is what made you do and go run that nonprofit, right? I mean, there's things, again, that shape us, that make us become what we do. So really think about, I always wanted to be a mom, but I babysat from a very early age and I loved that. So I knew that that was what I was going to do. Like I knew I was going to be a mom. I didn't know any other things, but I knew I was going to be a mom. And so again, it was the babysitting. It was connecting with babies and those little things that like I had great experience as a babysitter. I have friends that never had kids because they used to help me babysit and they were like, I don't like kids. Right. So they didn't do it. So those significant times you really need to sit and think about and find that space, whether it's in the shower, right? Whether maybe your mom that you could get 20 minutes on the toilet when no one's bothering you. I don't know, but think about just putting yourself in that kind of daydreaming time and then take your phone, take your computer and talk about it. Or I voice note tons of stuff. Like some people are better writing. Some people need to write it out on paper. Some people need to do it on their phone, voice text. I have to voice note, whether it's like a voice note or a text. And that's part of my dyslexia because I cannot spell anything. And so it's more frustrating for me. So find the way that you express the best and then go over it and dive a little bit into that and explore a little bit about those times. That's going to help kind of formate, right? Form, like take that story and put form to it. I tell people to do it kind of in chapters. Your early years, your kind of middle years, and then wherever you are in life, like, the chapter, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and really work on those separate. So really kind of pull those out. And the more that you work on those separate, the more you're going to be comfortable in that and be like, oh my gosh, I remember that, and get excited about remembering things. And then, oh wait, yes. And then you're going to see when you write it down or listen or whatever you do, you're going to be able to start connecting the dots. Sometimes people need help. They need like someone else to help them ask questions because that's really, there could be a friend, a parent, someone that can ask you, especially if you don't have the funds to hire someone, but someone could ask you questions on those. Like, I have this experience. I don't know why. Let me talk about it a little bit. It does take time. It's not one of those things that you're like, okay, I can do this and come up with something really quickly. Some people can. I mean, some people are like, okay, I do know there's things that I haven't sharpened, and they can go back and really formulate it. And it's easy because it's one of their gifts. Other people, it takes a little time. Again, you need to kind of know how you work best and what really drives you and how important getting your story out at that time is. I mean, I find we all go through that, right? Like I have an idea. Sometimes that idea can be done in, 2 months and then you have a business here. Other times it takes 7 months because that's the way people work.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey photographers, are you ready to make 2024 your best year yet? Growing a business is tough. You're following all the successful photographers and experts, soaking up their best advice and downloading all their free guides, trying to replicate their success only to come up lacking, blaming yourself when their methods don't work for you. But the truth is, it isn't you. Free content and one-size-fits-all courses can only get you so far. What you need is personalized help and guidance, but that can get expensive. Well, not anymore. I've created the perfect solution to get you personalized results for less than $2 a day. Introducing the Focus Photographer Lab, a one-of-a-kind coaching membership that gets you one-on-one results for a fraction of the cost of traditional coaching. Inside the lab, you'll find the 3 C's to success: classes, coaching, and community. With classes, you gain access to a treasure trove of pre-recorded trainings and invaluable resources. With coaching, you get monthly live trainings and Q&A sessions, along with my favorite part, the weekly one-on-one office hours, where we get to address your unique questions and challenges. And then there's the community, where you get to connect with an amazing group of talented female photographers who share your passion, supporting each other and inspiring each other to greatness. The best part is it doesn't come with an expensive one-on-one coaching price tag. You get all of that for just $47 a month. You can even try it for free for 14 days to make sure it's a good fit for you. And there is no contract and no obligation. You can cancel at any time. So what are you waiting for? Head down to the show notes and click the link to learn more and get signed up today. And let's make 2024 our best year yet. Yeah, I always think about I've used this concept in the past where I use it when I talk about your website or creation, thing like that, is have someone who has no connection to it, look over it and look and see where are they getting lost? Where are they going off path? And this is a great idea too with this, is to find somebody who doesn't already know this story that you are telling, share it with them and pay attention to where do they kind of start, where do you lose them? Because I think that's the refining process. I think that's where the difference between someone who tells a really captivating story, which we've all seen, we all are aware of what that feels and looks like, where you just you're hanging on every word, versus the ones where you're okay, you started off here and now you've gotten off on this other path here, you need to bring it back. So having someone that you can tell that story to and kind of pay attention and go, okay, I lost them at this point. How can I bring it back quicker? Or how can I maybe cut this part out? Because it is and I think there's a difference between, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, these core stories versus just your everyday moments you're sharing on maybe on social media. These core stories are the ones that you are going to use to share the bigger connections. And so they need to be refined. They need to be a little bit more polished, so that when you tell them, whether it's you said on a stage or on a Zoom call or in a written version or however podcast, however you're sharing it, you're doing it in a way that is a more polished version that keeps everything kind of on the path it needs to go.
Exactly. And that's why this is where then I tell people, you want in each kind of chapter of your life to have those 3 bullets in each of those that you have to touch on, because you know that those are the important things that shaped you and that are going to connect deeper. So even if you're on a podcast and it's not asked, you didn't ask if I had dyslexia, right? But I was able to bring it in because I knew that part of my life was going to connect with people. The sports, it's going to connect with a different audience. People, when you have one sentence, that sometimes that one sentence you get a little, whether it's a stereotype, but you get a little vision of who that person is by just one sentence. It's important to be able to know that one sentence, especially if you're networking, you're talking about your business, because it's going to give a little insight of, oh, wait, okay, I want to know more about this person because I never knew that. And I've been following them and like kind of breadcrumbing it out. And you're so right. Knowing when, especially if you're on a podcast, if you have a 30-minute to an hour where you can elongate some parts, there's some parts that you need to say because it's an important part, but you're not going to elongate it. So knowing when to intertwine those is also when you practice, and it really helps.
Yeah. I'm already thinking like having like different versions. Like I talk a lot about content. So I think about like the podcast, I go deeper. I talk a little bit more about the content pieces, like topics, or, and I don't like to write. So blogging is not my thing. But if I were to take like a podcast episode and that's my long form version of the story, but then on social media, it might be like, I need to condense it down. So having different variations, is that what you're saying? Like have kind of, or like knowing when and where to share what parts of your story based on where you're sharing and who you're sharing with. Is that right?
Exactly. And that's, again, if you're on a podcast, and you're doing the podcast circuit because you're really getting your business out there, you need to know the audience of that, because you want to know, oh, wait, this part of my story is going to connect a little deeper with that. Maybe I don't need to talk so much about my sports because I know this is not like a group that really cares about sports. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but it just gives people that deeper connection with you, that deeper feeling of who you are. And when people feel a little bit more about you and they feel kind of connected on that level, they're going to want to know more about you. So they're going to come back to your page. They're going to listen to your podcast. They're going to see, oh, are they doing anything different? Oh, if you're starting something new, I want to follow them because I'm curious. What are they doing? And it's because of that initial deep connection that they got from just a little bit about your personal story.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Okay. So I'm going to kind of wrap up here just because I want to respect everybody's time and your time, and I appreciate you coming on. If someone wants to learn more about what you do, because you obviously are really good at helping people kind of bring these things out, and there's only so much obviously you can do here on a podcast and on social media. So where can people get in touch with you or follow you or learn more about working with you?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I am Juliet Hahn is everywhere. And the reason why it's an I am is because there's a professor with exactly my same name that works at like the Citadel. She's like a scientist. I'm like, how ironic. And she's Juliet Hahn and she's older than me. So she has everything. So I am Juliet Hahn on most places, but LinkedIn, you can find me at Juliet Hahn, and it's JULIET, just like Romeo, and HAHN. My website is iamjuliethahn.com. I do offer like a free 30 minutes where people can kind of, find out if what I do with the storytelling consulting is what they want, and if they need, if we connect, that kind of stuff. And then on all the podcast players, Your Next Stop is my podcast. They can email me at info@iamjuliethahn. It's really, it's I am Juliet Hahn pretty much for everything except for LinkedIn. And
I love it. Well, and so there were two of the things I wanted to make sure we share these. So you do have a storytelling workshop, correct? That people can sign up and learn more about storytelling. Is that right?
So that is actually to find your passion. So that is,
find your passion.
So it's really it helps people. I started this like a long time ago, and it's still really relevant today. It's about what makes you tick. So if you're someone out there, if you're listening and you're like, I don't really have a business idea, or I really don't know what my next step is, but I don't love where I am in life, this kind of helps you really deep dive into what you want your life to look like. What are things that get you excited? Because again, so many people I have tons of passions. I have tons of stuff, but I'm really good at like 4 things, like really good at 4 of my passions. And those are the things I'm going to talk about. Some people might say, yeah, I have all these things and this is a passion, but I don't know how I can make that into a business. I really help them shape that.
Nice. Okay. So we'll have that linked. And then I want to talk really quickly about your new podcast you have coming out this summer that I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about. So talk about that real quick.
It's called Midlife-ish. And I have a co-host, Doran Wallach. She has a podcast that's called It's Not a Crisis. And we came together to collaborate. And it's going to be like a Netflix series. So it's going to come out sometime in the summer, all of the episodes. And it's going to be like between 6 and 10 episodes. But we really are talking about midlife, a lot of stuff that people are not talking about in the women's world, things that are happening to our bodies, things that are happening to our minds, things that are happening to our eyesight and our hearing, things that are happening, menopause-ish kind of stuff, but not too deep. And then every year, the next seasons, we're going to be kind of following what we're going through. Doran's a little bit younger, so she says she's not really in midlife, but I am totally in midlife. So that's why we call it midlife-ish.
Yeah. Oh, I cannot wait. That's going to
be
such a fun listen. So, well, Juliet, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story, and for helping us to get excited about sharing our stories. I really appreciate it. And everybody, make sure you go check out. I'll have everything linked down in the show notes for everybody. But go follow Juliet and make sure you keep up with what she's got going on. So thank you again so much for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Kendra, for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. And as always, you can find any links or resources mentioned in today's show down in the show notes. And if we're not friends outside the podcast yet, then what are you waiting for? Come find me on Instagram at Girl Means Business and send me a DM letting me know what you thought of today's episode or any of the past episodes you've listened to. You can also take a screenshot of today's episode and post it to your stories, tagging at Girl Means Business, and I'll give you a shout out on my page. I love connecting with you and hearing all about your business and can't wait to get to know you more. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will meet you back here next week, same time, same place.